In our previous video we created this output for our referees to use to actually input scores after games have been played. We haven't however wired this up such that when the referee actually selects a player, they will be able to record that into our database. And so that's what we're going to do now. So if we come across the NetBeans, we're obviously going to need a form that we can use to actually pass the data across. And to do that, we're going to create a form element within our new custom element. So up here we can create a form, which will end just outside of the table. In order for us to detect whether we've submitted the form already or not, we're going to create an invisible element. In this way, when we're actually looking at our results later on, we will be able to detect whether the run variable has been set or not. If it has been set, we know that the user has submitted the form, while if it hasn't been submitted by the user, i.e. it's the first time that the user is viewing the form, the run value won't be set, and so we can go ahead and just display the output. And this is actually how we will detect whether we're going to input anything to our database or not. If we go back across to the form element, we need to specify that the method that we're going to actually transfer this data will be post. The other alternative will be using get, which would actually add all of this information into the URL. And we don't want our users to see all of that information in the URL, we want to pass that across invisibly almost. We also need to specify the action. In our case, because we're using PHP, we can use this dynamically. And we're actually going to pass this information across from our main PHP file, because this can change depending on where the script is loaded from. And so we don't want to hard code this, because that would make us code ourselves into a corner. So we're going to use the double curly braces, and we're just going to call this page location, which means that we also need to pass that across. And then we need to specify the page location here. And all we're going to do is we're going to echo the environment variable getEnv and the specific variable that we want. It's called script name. So if we look at our example here, the script name for this will be results input 1. Now we also need to pass across another variable to our element, which is also going to be hidden, which is going to be the ID of the fixture. So again, we will need to pass this information across. And this time the specific variable that we want to pass across is fixture ID. And this will make it easier for us to specify the exact fixture that we want to update with the goal details later on. So the next thing that we can do is if we go to the results page, we can check whether the run value has been set or not. And we're actually going to do this before we actually load the page itself. So we have this section which is checking if the referee ID is set. Assuming it is, then we're going to want to check if the run value has been checked. And so to do this, we're going to filter input. The type is going to be filter underscore post. And the specific variable name that we're looking for is run. So if we know that the run variable has been set, then we're going to try to input the data, which we're going to do by calling a specific method within our model. And so we can go ahead and create this now. And for now, all we're going to do is file dump all of the data, which has been posted across. And after that, we will just kill the script. So if we refresh our page now, we're not going to actually get anything different. Then we're going to get this error message because we're trying to use is set on a function, and it's telling us that we should use null equals function to check that the function result isn't null. So we can change that here. And so if we try again, and we will get this error message telling us that we should have used an integer, or more specifically an enumeration, instead of the string that we've used here. So we can replace that there. And so if we refresh again, we're going to get this error message, which is the same message that we've just seen, because when we've used filter in our model, we've done the exact same thing. That should not be a string. So if we retry again, we're going to get the exact results that we would expect, because we haven't actually submitted the form at this point. If we do submit the form, it's going to take us to the home page, which is not the behaviour that we want it to perform. If we actually take a moment and inspect this element, specifically the form element, we can see that it's passed across index.php, which is not what we wanted it to pass across. We wanted it to pass across the actual path, not just the script name. And so if we close that again and go back across to NetBeans, we can actually replace this page location with just a hash, which also means that we don't need to pass page location across, and we don't need to pass it across from here either. So if we refresh our page and submit, we can see that we're not going to get any errors there. You may have noticed when we actually refreshed our page for the first time that we got those two error messages which then disappeared. If we go across to our model, this is because we're not actually looking for any specific values here. We're just trying to return all of the values. And so just because we're debugging rather than actually putting this into production code, we can just output the post data in a raw format. So we reload that again and submit our page. You will notice, however, that when we're refreshing our page, we're getting these two error messages still. If we come back across to NetBeans, this is actually because this filter should actually be input. And so if we refresh our page again, we're actually going to get the output which we would expect, because in this case we have submitted the form. If we try to display the form without submitting it, we obviously get through to the form as we would expect to see it, but submitting just takes us through to this page. So the next stage is going to be to build up all of the information here within this information that we're going to pass back across to our database that we're going to actually need to update our database. Once we've built up all of that data, we can then think about working on actually importing that data into our database. So the next thing we need to do, if we head back across to NetBeans, is to actually make sure that we're importing this in the correct way. We're going to want to actually make sure that we're importing this, or rather that we're reading this in the correct way, so that we're not going to make any mistakes later on. And so rather than using the $_post, we're going to filter the inputs just as we did here. We're also going to filter this again using filter var. And this is how we're going to actually sanitize our information that we're passing across. And so specifically we're going to type filter _sanitize. Then it gives us a couple of options, and we're going to specify that we're going to sanitize the URL. This means that any information which is passed across is going to be safe as far as our database is concerned. We're not going to be opening ourselves to things like SQL injection. It's also important that we store all of this information in what's going to be an array. So the first actual piece of information, if we go back across here, is going to be the fixture ID. So we're almost going to whitelist all of the data that we pass across, rather than just simply outputting every single piece of data which is passed across in a post format. So now that we've added the fixture ID, if we try to run our script again now, simply by refreshing the page, we can see that we're only going to get the fixture ID. We're no longer going to get the run value, or in fact the run variable. And this will help us to actually limit the data that's passed across, so that it's going to be the exact information that we want. You will notice, however, that this is saying true, and in fact we want it to be the actual value that we pass across. If you come back across to NetBeans, you can see that this is set to run instead of the fixture ID. So if we just replace that and refresh our page again, you can see that we get the right information. So the next thing that we need to do is to build up the rest of the information that we're going to need in order for us to actually record a goal being scored. And to do that, the next piece of information is going to be the team name. Unfortunately, because of the way that we've created our query, we're not able to access the team ID from the results input data. And so we're going to actually go ahead and create a new function to enable us to find the team ID from the team name. To do that, within the Stretch League class, which is going to create a new public function. Which are going to take a parameter of a string, and we're going to perform a select statement. So we'll copy that across from here. But we'll return that into a temporary variable. And we're going to select the team ID from the team table, where the team name is equal to team name. And because we're able to actually pass across an array which contains all of our data, we're going to create an array where we bind team name to the team name. We're simply going to return the results. So if we try to access this now, the team that we're using it for is someone else AFC. We will just kill our scripts just while we're testing this. So if we refresh again now, we need to actually access this properly. So if we refresh again, it's going to tell us that the team ID is 15 for this team. Now you can see as well that it's always going to be an array inside of an array, and so we can actually go ahead and remove this and actually return just the results that we're actually after. And so to do that, we simply need to return results 0 and specifically the team ID. So if you refresh this again now, it's simply going to return the 15 to us, which then means that all we need to do is pass across the team name, and we will be able to distinguish the actual team ID from that. So within our actual template, we can create another hidden element, which will be the home team name. We'll do the away team name as well. Within our model, we're going to need to then look for these pieces of information. So we will filter our input for that. And instead of our dumping this, we're just going to assign this to the data. Home team ID. And if we go back across to our page and refresh, we're going to get an error saying that we've not got this offset. Because we're specifically looking for this in a specific format, we also can't filter it, because the filtering process actually removes, or rather converts, the format. So it will convert a space into %20, for example. So if we refresh again, we can see that we get the home team ID being 15, which is exactly what we wanted it to be. So if we copy this line down and turn this into a away team ID, and refresh again, we're going to get the correct away team ID as well. The final piece of information that we need to insert into our database to record a goal is the player's ID number. Because it will be quite difficult to manage the actual goal scorers section of our page, we're actually going to move this into the main PHP file and then pass the entire table across into our paper element. This is because we're going to have things like multiple goal scorers and the same goal scorer being able to score multiple goals for each team, which if we try to manage within our paper shadow elements which we've created, it's going to be very difficult to actually pull off. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy everything up to here, basically after the table name itself. And we're going to move all of this outside of the element itself. So on the actual input page, inside of the elements that we've created, this stretch result input, we're going to actually create a table here and paste across the information from our actual players list table. If we just left this as it was, we wouldn't actually display the information as we wanted to. If we go back to our page now and try to refresh this, it's not going to include the information at all. We need to do one more step, which is after the table here, we're going to create a contents tag and type the select parameter, which we're going to select as the table. We then need to close that element as well. If we refresh our page again now, those fields show up again. Now this obviously doesn't take full advantage of the fact that we want to use Polymer as much as possible in this project, but it does allow us the much greater control that we actually need in order to control these elements, because we obviously want this to be functional as well as looking at how Polymer works. Speaking of using Polymer as much as possible, we can actually replace these buttons with the Polymer buttons which are available to us. This is more of a visual thing than anything else, but it will allow us to have a look at how Polymer works with different elements. So the location that we want to refer to is going to be the bower components. We want to use the paper button, which is here. And we want to use the paper buttons.html. And this will allow us to replace the button with paper buttons. In terms of functionality, they are exactly the same as a normal button, but if we refresh our page, you'll see that we have these animations automatically included. We can go one step further and actually specify that we want this to be raised, and if we refresh our page again, we can see that the button itself has an outline on it. We obviously want to do this for the plus button, the submit button, as well as the minus and plus buttons on the right as well. So now that we've changed those, if we refresh our page again, all of them are going to be in the format that we want, except for these two, because we haven't added the raised parameter onto them, which we can do right now. And finally, refreshing one more time shows us our paper versions of these buttons. Now we can go a step further and actually draw people's attention to the add button on these pages, which is going to draw people's attention to that functionality. And to do that, all we need to do is to style our buttons. So to do that, we're just going to add them into a class. Which we're going to call primary button. And then within our main page style sheet, where we're going to set the background colour to 428 5F4, which we've already used, and so autocomplete is going to help us out there. If we come back to our page and refresh the page, we're going to see that our background colour is set for these elements. We still obviously have the ripple effect, which is inherited by all buttons, but we do obviously take more advantage of paper elements like this. So we can close out of the main CSS class. So now that we've moved our actual select options across into the PHP file, we're going to need to actually go ahead and convert this code into actual PHP. So for example, player in players no longer works in this context. We need to turn this into an actual while loop or a for loop. And that also means that we don't need to pass across the player's information to our actual custom element. So we can delete that and delete it from our custom element as well. So we can basically delete this entire repeat section. And all we're going to do is just create a loop within PHP, within the element itself. And we're not going to have the template anymore. This is going to be directly inside of the select statement itself. And so we're just going to convert this into an echo statement, which we're going to echo out the specific values as we need them. So we need to echo out the player ID, and the player name. So we can go ahead and test that out now. So if you refresh our page, in our first section we're going to see all of the player names. We haven't done it for our second section yet, and so that's not obviously going to work yet. So we can basically just copy this directly across, replacing the template and everything that goes inside of it. And if we go back to our page again and refresh, it will work on our right hand side as well. So the next thing that we need to do is to go ahead and pull the data from our database about which players have scored in which games, specifically the information from the goal scorers table, which may include no goal scorers at all being recorded for a game. So to do that, we're going to go across to Stretch League, and we're going to create a new function called goalscorers, which is going to take a fixture ID as the parameter. And I'm just going to copy across this functionality. So we're going to select the player ID and the team ID. From the goal scorer table, where the fixture ID is equal to the fixture ID. And we're going to bind the data across. Fixture ID is equal to the variable fixture ID. And we're not going to limit the returned output as we did when we were dealing with our ID for the teams. We want to output every single instance of this. So within our results model, we're going to create another function, get goal scorer data, and we're going to need to pass across the fixture ID. And just like with the others, we're going to return get goal scorer. And pass across the fixture ID. Instead of calling this function from our controller, however, we're actually going to call this from the get results input data screen. And to make this easier, we're going to pass this to the specific variable called data and return the data variable. This will allow us to go ahead and add in our goal scorers. So data goal scorers is equal to this get goal scorer data, and we're going to get our goal scorer data from our data, or rather we're going to get our fixture ID from our data element. And if we refresh our page, you can see that we get this error message, and this is because when we're actually returning our results data, we're getting potentially multiple results. So we're getting something like this. And so we need to account for the fact that we can have multiple fixtures returned to us, which is easily done. So we can just do for each. And all we need to do is append that I. And if we refresh our page again, you can see that we display our data as we would expect. You can see, however, that when we refresh our page, we get an error message appear first. If we just kill our script at this point and refresh again, you can actually see that error message and read it. And it simply says that the variable array isn't set. And that's simply because the array here should be the data. So if we refresh again, you can see that we get this error message here. So if we go back into our stretch league, we can check that we've called it the same thing. We've called it get goal scorers here. So we can rename it to get goal scorer data, because that's more accurate. And if we refresh again, we're going to get the page loads in correctly with no error messages. In fact, if we want to, we can go ahead and just output the data element and just kill our script at the same time. And then if we refresh our page again, you'll see that the goal scorers is recorded here. And for both teams in this instance, we have no goal scorers. Now this actually makes it quite difficult for us to test out our script to make sure that it's working fully. And so I'm going to go ahead and just update our database to include some goal scorers. So I'm simply going to type update goal scorers. In fact, we need to just insert into. And for this first example, we know that our fixture ID is 120. And so we can just set 120, player 5, and team 15. And as you can see, we've got this error message saying that the foreign key constraint fails. And so we're going to actually need to use the correct data. So to find the correct data, we simply need to select all from fixtures where fixture ID is equal to 120. So we can see that our home team ID is 15 and our away team is 3. And so because we have 15, we just need to find any players who play for team 15. And so we can change this to any of these player IDs here. So we can select 40. And then we can come back and maybe select some more. And we obviously need to insert this data into the fixture player data as well. So we'll copy and paste all of this. Now that we've inserted that information, we can go ahead and insert the goal scorer. So if we refresh this page now, we will see our goal scorer appear down here. Now we are really running long on this video, and so I'm going to have to break it here. So if we remove the Vardon Pandai and go back to our web page, you can see that we have updated the input sections to be more paper-based, and we've refactored our code so that we have more control over exactly how this information is displayed. So within our actual input page, we're going to pass across this entire table, which will be pre-formatted into our custom element, rather than using our custom elements to actually format all of this for us. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and use all of the information that we've just gathered. For example, the goal scorer information. We're going to display that on the screen, and then we're going to go ahead and create an element for each goal scorer, as well as the ability to update our actual database, which we've been working to all along. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out. This will, however, give us a problem, because each of these forms is going to have the same name, and we're potentially going to have multiple forms. For example, we will potentially have one form for this and one form for this second line, which will have the same ID.